Meeting Tekenda. Being the inventor and manufacturer of an off-road vehicle, it was very clear Africa needed what we had to offer. Frank had gotten close to what could possibly be a rather large sale for us, and he had requested I join him to help close the sale. Before coming to Africa, I'd seen the movie Last King of Scotland, and had just recently been to the movies to watch Blood Diamonds. I had previously seen the movie Hotel Rwanda, so I had preconceived ideas of how things were going to be. I was scared to death. Before traveling, I had to take a series of shots. I was warned not to go barefoot and not to drink the water. They told me about malaria and my chances of getting infected. They gave me pills to take before going, while I was there, and after I got home. They backed that up with a warning. This might not work. I felt good about that. Upon arriving, I found a totally different place than I had imagined. I expected to land in the jungle and find everything hot, dirty, and run down. What I found was a place much like it was in the United States in the late 60s. It was semi-modern, clean, and somewhat busy. I found the people to be ultra-friendly, and in the capital city, I felt safe. There were armed guards or soldiers about every 100 yards everywhere you went. The man we were to meet, Tekenda, was from the Democratic Republic of Congo, and wanted to meet at a motel near the border between Rwanda and the DRC. We traveled out of the capital city and drove for about 2 hours. We arrived in a small city that was dirty and had large potholes filled with water. People walking down the street all looked at us like you don't belong here. I saw many people with guns, and they didn't look friendly. This got my blood pressure up just a little. But I was assured we had nothing to worry about. Yeah, right. We arrived at the motel, which was a breath of fresh air. It was modern, well kept, and located on Lake Kivu. I called Tekenda, and upon arriving, he told us he would be there later to take us to lunch. I was expecting to eat at the motel restaurant. Tekenda finally arrived and told us to follow him. We drove down some rough streets and arrived at an individual's home. He had prearranged for a local woman and her family to prepare our lunch. As I later found out, he was not allowed to be in the country, and he didn't trust food made by strangers. How comforting. We arrived and got out of the car. He had a bodyguard and another right-hand man with him. They stood off in the shadows during lunch. It was apparent they were all carrying weapons, including Tekenda. Lunch was good. It was all ethnic and consisted of a small portion of meat and mostly vegetables. We sat at picnic tables, and they served us from their house. When it came time to leave, Tekenda asked me if I wanted to ride with him. He had a shiny, brand new BMW SUV. He told me it had a high-performance motor and would exceed 130 miles an hour on the interior roads if necessary. Then he told me, and dropped the bomb, and said it also had bulletproof windows and a special Kevlar lining in the doors that would stop, or at least slow down, most machine gun bullets. In addition, it could run on flat tires that could take a .50 caliber bullet and keep going at 60 miles an hour. Fast enough for the back roads of DRC. Of course, I was concerned and eventually asked, "Why in the world do you need a bulletproof car?" His response was, "I'm just sick and tired of people trying to assassinate me." Oh, that made me feel good. That became the longest ride in my life. I just knew it'd be right in the middle of a gunfight before we made it back to the motel. I thought I would die in Africa with my body never to be found. Thankfully, nothing happened, and we arrived back at the motel. We made small talk and eventually got into the main topic. I asked what he did for business. He told me he was a tin miner. Conceivable, but not actually true. I asked him, how would we fit into his operation. His reply was, "About 60 miles from here, there's a landing strip located in the jungle. I use it to transport the tin out of the bush and get it to market. I have 22 Citation airplanes landing and taking off every day." Now, I'm not totally stupid, and I don't care how many Citations you land and take off. You can't haul enough tin out to pay for the fuel. But I listened. He had his story together and took us into a private room where he showed us a video of what he expected from the vehicle. Basically, a man would leave from the landing strip and walk 2 days into the bush, following a few paths with marked trees. Upon arrival, the man would have his legs tied together and then duct tape a light to his forehead. He was given a garden hose to be used as a breathing tube. The backpack they provided was filled with digging tools. Eventually, they would lower him upside down into a hole where he would dig for tin. Once he filled the backpack, he would tug on a hose and they would pull him out of the hole. The product was inspected, and they would keep lowering him back into the hole until he had enough of the high-quality material to carry back to the path to the landing strip. This process was repeated over and over again. He showed us detailed views of the terrain and kept asking if our equipment would operate in this or that particular area. I answered yes to most of his questions and gave him alternative ways to operate around obstacles. He had already provided videos of demo rides in similar terrain, so he had a good idea what I was telling him was true. Besides that, who's going to lie to a man who drives a bulletproof car? Frank and I asked for the sale, and he thought he would like to purchase 20 coots. Nice order, but first he had to explain how things worked in the area where he had his mines. Even if he wanted to purchase these items, he had to get permission from the general. Who was this general? It seems as though in many parts of the DRC, it operates just as if it was run like our mafia. Each territory had a general, a military man with either a guerrilla force or a government-sponsored force under his command. The general provided protection in exchange for a cut of the operation. As profits are generated by controlling costs, he is in or all major purchases that affect his cut. So Tekenda called the general. They talked over the phone and discussed what he had just been over. He told the general it was time for him to talk with me. He handed me the phone. We had a few words of introduction, and he got down to business and told me that although there was no actual war between the DRC and Rwanda, he was not welcome where we were at. We were just about a half-mile from the border. So he asked if I minded if we traveled to him. For some stupid reason, I told him I didn't mind. He told me he would send a couple of vehicles with his soldiers driving. They were to call us just before their arrival, and we should be waiting outside so they can get back across the border right away. Once in his country, we would be taken to an opening in the bush where he would land his helicopter and we could meet. He added that he couldn't come right then because he had a small domestic disturbance he had to take care of first. He would let us know when he was ready. Tekenda and I continued our conversation and swapped a few stories. We waited until it started to get a little late in the afternoon, so Tekenda called him again. Tekenda asked me to get on the line. When I put the phone to my ear, I could hear shots being fired in the background. The general told me the disturbance had gotten a little out of hand, and he was afraid if he flew out right then, they would shoot his helicopter down. He apologized and told me to give the information to Tekenda and discuss payment terms. With that, I thought to myself, I just dodged a bullet, literally. So, Tekenda and I opened discussions on payment. It got down to so much up front and so much upon delivery, due right then and there in cash. This part of Africa was still a cash-based society, and those were their terms. He said he and the general had plenty of U.S. dollars. In fact, they had a ton of $100 bills stored in a secret location. I don't know, is this true or not, but we'll find out. Then Tekenda gave me an alternative. He asked if I would rather be paid in rough-cut diamonds rather than cash in U.S. dollars. So much for the tin mine. I declined and told him I had no experience with diamonds. He said he could provide me enough diamonds to where I would make an enormous amount of extra money. Again, I turned him down. I told him I had no way I could ever get diamonds through customs, even if I did agree. With that, he told me, which scared the hell out of me, I could expect diamonds on my porch at my address within the next week. Which scared the hell out of me that he knew that information. I told him you could give me a bucket of shiny rocks and I'd never know the difference. Once again, I told him no. We then agreed on cash. He said he would be back at our offices in the city over the weekend to give us the down payment and pick up the 2 units we had in stock. On that first trip, I learned quickly that when in Africa, you're not in Kansas anymore. The rules are very different. Now, this is Africa, my friend, and cheating each other in a business deal is very common. So that next week, Tekenda arrived in town with a few changes to the deal. We had 24-hour guards around our compound where the coots were stored. These guards only made about $200 a month, and they were guarding about $60,000 worth of equipment. Long story short, Tekenda approached one of the guards and cut a deal where he would pay them $2,000, and all they had to do was leave the site for 1 hour at a specific time. It was apparent that Tekenda's people would then come in and steal the inventory. It would have worked, except one of the guards told Frank. Frank, still acquainted with several old friends in the military, got together and planned to be on site hiding with an armed backup. When the time came, I was told they heard a rather large truck coming down the street facing our compound. It was about 2 a.m. Our compound was surrounded by an 8-foot wall with broken glass and concrete. In the front of the compound was a solid steel gate with a main door located in it. The truck stopped in front of the steel gate. Tekenda arrived with the truck, got out, and made his way to the main door. Frank waited until Tekenda opened the door. They had set up lights to shine directly on that door, and Frank waited quietly until Tekenda opened the door and made himself visible. That's when they turned on the lights and raised their guns, all pointing toward Tekenda. Tekenda just looked up, smiled, and slowly backed out of the gate. Even though his armed guards were ready, he decided this was not a time to fight. Again, this is Africa, and forgiveness for something like this is understood and accepted. Why, I got no idea. Tekenda came around to talk to Frank later in the week. They had a few words and got back to discussing business. He was to show up on Saturday, pay what he owed, and take the inventory. Saturday came and nothing happened. He never heard from Tekenda or the general again. About 6 months later, we learned that another general had forcibly taken over their territory, found the money, and put Tekenda and the general in prison. I can only imagine they were eventually executed. As an adventure, this was about top the list. It wasn't one I wanted to experience ever again, but was fun doing it the first time.